When we lived in South Africa, we lived on a school property where I was a teacher. And the school property is just open, there are fields, there's a wildlife area attached to it so the kids could go swim in the dam, go fishing, go riding their bikes. So it was an idyllic place to raise two boys.
There were times of intense fear, you know, having intruders in your house and that, but the normal times in between that was perfect, really.
Our family was close by. You know, it's the land that you were born in, and your family's there, your friends are there, as well as the whole thing of the hope for the country.
And for me, it was definitely family that kept me there. Everyone you love is there. There's a guilt that you feel about leaving. It's hard to get to the point where you've got to choose between your parents and your children's future. Before this experience, it was like being on a tandem bicycle. I was quite comfortable in the front seat, steering and feeling a little bit in control, but knowing that God was always there with me. I thought I trusted God, but I was quite happy for Him to be at the back. So He was part of my life and I was trusting Him in a way. I had to make a conscious decision to get off the front seat and trust that whatever you're going to allow to happen to us is ultimately for all of our good.
We had a nephew and his girlfriend visiting us from Australia, and we had dropped them off at a game reserve and they were doing a horseback trail. And we shot out to see friends on a farm. As we were leaving, we had to climb up this hill on the vehicle, and there were these rocks across the road. As a South African, you always get told when people barricade roads, it's a dangerous situation. I remember both of us looking out to see if there was anybody hiding. And then we decided that we were going to just drive around it. And as I was approaching that's when two men ran at us. And so I tried to get out of the way, reverse, and started heading out. And I just remember Gayle shouting, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun."
I just looked up and there was a guy running down the bank at me with a knife and a gun.
We stopped and we were going to be compliant. We spoke to the boys, let's just stay calm and we'll get out of this. I remember Gayle just saying, "Please, we'll get out, just let us take the kids." And then they said, "Get into the back seat, we don't want the car, we want you." That we realised that this is now a whole lot more serious.
I was trying to undo my safety belt and move into the back seat with the children, but he was just lashing at me with a knife as I was doing this. I got 3 wounds on my arm, and just to see that knife, the bruising around here where the knife had also struck me but hadn't broken the skin.
You know, it is fortunate that you were turning to try and move, otherwise your arm wouldn't have been in the way of that knife.
So we got into the back seat with the children and it was all just very surreal. Aidan and myself, the first thing we did was call out on the Lord's name. The attackers weren't very happy with, and they said, "No more Jesus, no more Jesus."
I remember you calling out very distinctly, and God did deliver us.
They went down a forestry road which was really dark, and we knew that once we were in there nobody from the main road would see us. Crazy thoughts just start going through your head.
I thought this is the way it will end. I just didn't want my kids to see anything happening to me or to their mom. They said the whole thing was about money and they wanted 50,000 Rand, basically $5,000. They said we're just going to go into town and going to draw money and then it'd be over. I was taken out of the car just to be put into the boot.
I just said to them, you know, there's no way I can fit in there. They came at me with a knife to untie my hands, and then I was able to fit into a very cramped boot. And they told the children to lie on the back seat and they covered them up with our jackets. And then they took off with us to realize that the situation we were in the boot, we had no power to do anything. So no one there was going to be able to come and help us. And the only person that could help us was God. That was just the beginning of the nightmare, I think.
Yeah.
Just being separated from our children, not knowing what their intentions were. as we drove out the town, I just realized that this was really happening and there was nothing in my power that I could do. I had to get to a point where I had to completely surrender the whole situation to Him. I negotiated a little bit with God at that point. By this stage, it was getting really stuffy and hot in the boot as well. And I said to Him, you know, Lord, the thing that I am begging You for is ultimately that the four of us will go home unharmed tonight. But for right now, if we could just have some cool air. And with that, the boot was filled with the most freshest, awesome air I've ever felt. That was God saying to me, you just need to be still. Be still and know that I have got this. You don't need to struggle. You don't need to come up with all these dramatic plans. Just be still. And I did. I felt this huge peace.
I had this incredible time of worship, stuck in a boot, cramped up, and then the peace of God came over me. I remember waking up to the radio news broadcaster, and it's 4 o'clock, and I must have fallen asleep. I could have been stewing for 3 hours, and God had taken me out of that. We got anxious when we heard them talking about needing fuel. I'm thinking if they're filling up with fuel, it's going to progress and they're going to be driving further. So we knew that we needed to escape. We were in one of those hatchbacks where the seats folded forward, so it wasn't a separated boot in itself. As we pulled into a service station, I just remember feeling like, I don't want to do this, I can't do this, and you started getting all that doubt. And then I remember looking at Gayle, and she looked at me and we just said, we're doing this. And it was that confirmation nod. And we felt that they had pulled up in a service station. I heard the driver get out, open up the fuel tank, and as the nozzle was going in there, I knew it's one person's distracted. During the time when we had been talking, I noticed that the weapons were on the front by the passenger's feet. So I knew that they weren't readily available. We both just pushed the chairs forward and told our children, get out, get out. And I went forward between the two driver's seat and the passenger seat and started wrestling with the passenger who was now going for the weapon. And then as they were driving off, I then jumped out of the moving car.
I just expected to see Callum on the right-hand side of the car. And when the car sped off, there was no Callum standing there. And it took a few seconds to kind of realize that he was still in the vehicle.
I'll never forget the feeling that I haven't protected my son. And then the cry, the anguish in Gayle's cry of they got my boy, they got my boy.
That's just every parent's nightmare, exactly as horrible as you would expect it to feel. And I just became hysterical, begging people to just follow the car and report to the police where it was going.
In the desperation of watching the car just pull out and over the bridge and gone, and then trying to get people to help. Will I ever see my son again? Will they throw him out the car just so they get rid of him? The fact that we were out of the hijacking situation alive is unusual in South Africa.
As any parent would do, I just begged that we would get him back soon and that he wouldn't be harmed.
How often, we read about the Israelites and we think, oh, come on, you had the Red Sea parted for you and you've had all these other things given to you and you still forget about God's providence. Again, God was saying, you've trusted me so far, continue. It was an hour, and that's not a long time when I thought I'd never see him again. But it was an eternity, that hour. When you look back at it and how many God instances were in that and miracles, we got out to the petrol station of a believer. He was able to phone a friend of his who is connected with the farm network. They already knew that we were missing because we hadn't gone and picked up our nephew yet. And somebody was following them and seeing that they were driving erratically, and he decided to phone it in. And the police said, give me the registration, and he gave it and they said, please follow that car, there's a child in it who's been kidnapped. The farmers then went and positioned themselves in every off-ramp along the highway. So we knew within 40 minutes that our car had been spotted and was being followed, and we were just waiting. As soon as the hijackers took a off-ramp, two total strangers who didn't know each other were able to box in the car so it couldn't carry on going forward. And another guy came with an old Land Rover and hit the car so hard that his axle actually came off the vehicle and prevented them from reversing. And it was such that the two front doors weren't able to be opened, but the back door could. So Dave, a friend who Callum knew, was the man who took him out of that situation.
The fact that Callum wasn't hurt in that whole process, not a bruise. And the whole rescue was just an incredibly humbling experience to realize how many strangers, people in the community that didn't even know us, were willing to leave their security and their families and put themselves out there. As a parent, all I wanted to do was comfort my children and to reassure them that this isn't going to happen again. But knowing where we lived, I knew that I couldn't make that promise. I was filled with this desperation to get them out and into a safer country. Athol applied for so many jobs and we looked into so many different visas. It was only once we stopped desperately trying that all of a sudden Athol got the phone call.
There's this position available, and then I applied to that, and as it would happen, I got given two offers from two different schools at the same time.
A big difficulty was falling asleep at night. The fear would once again set in, and any little noise that they heard would make them and us scared. One of the bands we discovered at that point was For King and Country. Their song Shoulders was one that our family would turn up full the volume and sing along to. Yeah, I could just especially see the music getting through, the words getting through to our boys. It's hard to know that as Christians, you're not exempt from any of the evil atrocities that happen on this earth. God is aware of it, and it breaks his heart. He wants to be our strength in those times.
On the day of the hijacking, Callum asked us, why does God let bad things happen to good people? And we were able to talk through that even before, so it was almost like there's preparation before the thing happened. God never promised us a life without difficulty or hardship or heartache, but he promised us that he would be with us through everything. And we've managed to come to New Zealand, but the healing is still happening, and you know, God's ways are higher than our ways, and we don't understand much of the time as to why things are the way they are. But we just need to be able to trust everything works to the good for those who love him. And that's where we've been for the last 2 and a bit years. In a sense, very grateful for that experience. We've been able to have some really deep conversations with our boys about faith and about the relevance of what it means to be a Christian in an evil world, and that you are different, but you're going to not be exempt from these things. The relationship that we have with Christ is every day.